So talk to me a little bit about today's conversation is all about pricing, and tell me about some of the challenges or battles or experiences you guys are having out in the field today when it comes to pricing. Let's just kind of talk expectations and what your needs are today, and so that I can make sure that we hit on all those spots. So talk to me about your experience out there in the pricing realm right now.
Hey, Steve, I'm the OP of the Memphis office,
Yes,
and
Sarah.
we are so where we're doing extremely well is we've got more listings taken than we ever have before. So we're starting to take market share, but obviously we've got to get, and we're outpacing the association, which is great.
Nice.
But which is causing a lack of under contract and close because we are realizing that we're not pricing aggressively enough in the market. So we actually showed your video on YouTube
Hmm.
at a stakeholder meeting, which has prompted these conversations. So we've got a lot of opportunity with price reduction conversation and setting the right expectations up front with
Perfect.
strategies.
Awesome. We'll dig into all that, Sarah. Thanks. What else?
I'm opening up the mic for Dallas North and North. Anybody got questions or statements they'd like to give Steve?
I'm here because I'm not pricing right.
You're not pricing right. Okay. Yeah. Well,
Steve, this is
and I think there's probably a lot of hands that could go up and say, "Me too, me three, me four," um,
We had a
because
realtor and actually yesterday and last week on two of her homes that she's got, the people that went through with their realtors. So she's the listing agent. The buyer's agents went through, and the number one comment was the house is underpriced, which I thought was very interesting.
it was underpriced. Yeah, I don't think you can do that in this market.
Yeah, yeah, I was like, well, jack up that price then. That's what my suggestion is.
Yeah. Well, so make us a great offer. It's interesting perspective wise is, and I'll share some stories on this. I got to live this through my daughter recently who sold their house in Murfreesboro, and moved to Florida. And of course, the market was shifting, and dad's over there in her ear, talking to her about price and maybe price philosophy, especially when they felt like they were the best priced home, in the neighborhood, which they were, but they weren't the best priced or valued home in their competing market. And that's a completely different thing altogether. And so I'm gonna spend some time today kind of driving your thinking around pricing, and it's how do we have to think so that we price right? What do we have to bring the seller to discover to price right? And uh, and so we're going to set a lot of foundation, and then we'll wrap up with really digging into a pricing conversation that, and of course, Sarah was mentioned, y'all played this video around this. We'll dig deep and I'll answer your questions on the pricing conversation that has helped me over decades now with getting the right price every single time, or darn near every single time, and or setting the table for the easy conversation on price reductions when it has to happen. But there's a lot of philosophy that goes into this, and there's a lot of having gone through lots of shifting markets. We're letting some more people in the Zoom right here. And Memphis, how we doing? Y'all tell me when we're ready.
We're ready for you, Steve, whenever you're ready.
Okay, let's do this thing. I'm going to go ahead and spotlight myself. And there you go. And just so you know, I'm flying solo today. If you put something in the chat, I may not see it immediately, and yet this is going to be interactive. So if y'all have got something to share, questions, I'll pause and we can kind of revisit pieces of this as we go. This is designed to be kind of informal, yet very comprehensive. You know, dot the I's, cross the T's for you so you know how to approach this. But let's make it interactive and we'll engage together. So let me go ahead and I'm going to pull up my slides. So let me get here. And you've got the title slide. Y'all seeing that okay?
Yes.
Got it. Okay, thank you, Sarah. So shifting markets. So we're going to set the stage for a powerful conversation to get the seller to choose the right price every time. And as we jump into this, there is a point today where I'm going to talk to you about conversations that you have and lead generation. So just I'm a reminder to you today to make sure that when we talk lead generation or how you're connecting with your database, educating your database on the market, make sure that you're communicating in a TCPA, do not call compliance manner, that we're observing all those do not call list and so forth. And so before we get started today, just a quick introduction in case we haven't met. My name's Steve Schlueter. I'm a longtime veteran of the real estate market. I started my real estate career in Austin, Texas, in a market that was in severe decline. In fact, this was the time Gary Keller talks about when Keller Williams in Austin, or the Board of Realtors in Austin, went from 5,000 agents to 1,800 agents in about 15 months. And somehow that was when I decided to get into real estate. So it was in a severe decline, and uh, average days on market was about 165 for the ones that were selling. And I had to learn a conversation that would help me get people to make good decisions on pricing. And that's what we're going to get into today. Just a little background. Like I said, I started my career well, and I'm going to even tell you back when. It was in the 80s. And when we were in the severe decline in Texas well, I'll tell you, 1987. You can do the math. 37, 8 years now in real estate. And have had the privilege and experience to see many shifting markets and see what the opportunity of them really is. In fact, the disciplines learned in a shifting market serve us so well. I became one of the top 20 REMAX agents in the state of Texas prior to joining Keller Williams, and was recruited to Keller Williams by Gary Keller to be a team leader. And so I spent 4.5 years working for Gary as team leader of the Austin Northwest Market Center. Led the early development of the Keller Williams Heartland region. Today, I operate a couple of market centers in the Austin area. I'm a bold coach, part of the Keller Williams University Master Faculty, and have a group coaching program called Never Ending Referrals. And I'm the creator of that little DTD2 system so many agents love to hate. But it works, yes. So that said, that's Steve. Let's jump into everything pricing. And like I said, I'm going to send you these slides when we're done, and some of it we're going to go through rather quickly, some of it we're going to slow down. And I just want to start off with the agent IQ test. Number one, how do you know a listing is overpriced? Somebody tell me, how do you know a listing's overpriced? It's sitting on the market.
Yeah, people are saying no showings or no offers,
No showings, no
days on
offers.
market.
Yeah, it's sitting on the market. You know, it's interesting. And so many times I'll have people in a bold room or somewhere come up to me and they'll say, Steve, but you know, I'm not getting any action on this home, but it's really priced right. And I'm going, no, it's not. And let's just get real clear right there. That's where we have to kind of rubber meets the road. If it's not selling, it's the price. Now you could say, okay, well, it's got functional obsolescence, or it's got situational things like it backs to busy street or railroad track or whatever. Well, that can be accounted for in price. You can make it a great value. So what's the price where value, perception, and price meet that causes it to be the one that people say yes to? And so we know that for today's context, we're going to go with it's always the price. With very rare exception, you could have something that's very unusual luxury property, something niche that's going to take a lot longer. And yet for what it is, what is the right price? So let's go back to this. And as we dive into this, the right pricing it right happens twice. First with you, then with the seller. And when I say it begins with you, is you have to go in certain about what that price needs to be. Else you get very swayed by somebody else's emotion around what they think they have to have or what the price should be. So it first happens with you, then it happens with the seller. Now, this comes right out of the Shift book, Tactic 7, page 135. And when we think about this, let's think about some perspective on pricing. When a market shifts towards a buyer's market, the listings that sit, we don't want to let this happen to your sellers. And so when we think about some perspective on pricing strategies, number one, in a buyer's market, remember real estate becomes a commodity. Now, we're not really in a buyer's market, we're kind of normalizing. And I think that's one of the things that we've got to get clear right now, and especially, Memphis. I've looked at some of the stats. I mean, you're actually normalizing probably than you are a buyer's market. And yet it may feel more like a buyer's market because it's beginning to favor buyers better than it has before. And yet as we lean, maybe, especially as we get past the seasonal part of the market, which we're shifting past now, what happens in these markets is only properties in good condition and priced right sell in a buyer's market. This is not crazy COVID unicorn times where you just put it out there and people buy anything. Now, here's another key point. I want you to sit on this one. Price can correct bad condition. Bad condition won't correct bad price. I'm sorry, but condition won't correct bad price. You can have a great condition, but if the price is wrong, it doesn't fix it. Price can fix bad condition. Condition won't fix bad price because now it's a commodity. There's too many things out in the market for people to choose from, and they're not biting necessarily as fast. And of course, we got to come from the attitude and belief that 80% of our marketing effort is making sure, number one, we get the price right from the very beginning. Now, let's continue. Now, your role in a buyer's market, or I'm just going to use a softening or normalizing market, versus when homes sold in a matter of days. Here's the challenge: we were kind of undervalued then. We were order takers. Get it on the market. Get your 32 offers. Get it done. But now, clients, customers, they need from you pricing strategy, market knowledge. This is true on the buyer side too. You know, they need you to bring them to buyers. They are looking for that absolute fiduciary commitment. They what are the knowledge and how we navigate the financing options and competing with builder concessions and all these negotiating skills, the things that have to be worked through today versus just working through 10, 12, 15 offers. And so let's talk about just perspective for a minute. And I want to talk about opportunities for agents, opportunities for sellers. Let's talk about you first. What do y'all think some of the big opportunities are for you as agents in this kind of market that you're experiencing right now, where it's softening, things are staying on the market a little longer? What are some opportunities for you?
Linda, do you got anybody in the
Yeah.
room?
Yes, people are saying getting creative, marketing, advertising. I guess what they're saying is kind of mind share right now.
Okay. All right. Now, by the way, if I have inventory or listings, you think about online presence. Do people go online looking for agents or looking for houses?
Houses.
They go on looking for houses. So now I've got some inventory. As Sarah said, you guys are building inventory right now. So that means you're also going to be getting more eyeballs on that inventory. And so there's a conversion opportunity. The other opportunity for you as agents right now is, I will tell you, when you adapt to this market well, real estate can be really fun again. I don't know too many agents that were having a good time during COVID. I mean, I had people that were working buyers that would walk into my office crying. This is the fifth offer I've written for these people, and they're so frustrated. I feel like I'm failing them. And it was the nature of the beast of the market. And on the seller side, managing 20 offers isn't easy either. And working through the chaos of the crazy unicorn times that we had. And so as the market normalizes a little bit, you also have the opportunity to go secure listings through expired listings for sale by owners that are struggling, canceled that just need a new approach. And so the opportunity to go get listings is probably easier than it's been before. And then, of course, when you get the right pricing dialogue, get it priced right, you have the opportunity to massively outperform the market. And we're going to talk about that today. Now, on the seller side, let me ask you all a question. What was the biggest objection sellers had about selling a home during the crazy COVID unicorn times, Dallas? So somebody chime in. What were the sellers' biggest concerns about selling during those times?
Selling too fast and not being able to get another house.
Yeah, where am I going to move to? And can I even get another house? I'm afraid to sell because what if we sell and I can't find a house to replace this house? Um, and of course, then you have the whole lockup. And that was a real scare. Some people that were had to sell moved in other markets, just rented because the pressure they were under, they had to move, and it really made it some difficulty. So for sellers today, even though sellers may have a softer market, they get to be a buyer in a softer market. So sometimes people go, well, what's the advantage to sell right now? Well, it's you get to be a buyer in this market rather than a buyer in a market where you had to overcompete, over bid to get a home. So understand there are big opportunities for both sellers and agents right now. Of course, we know the opportunities for buyers, more choices, better selections. So let's go back to the slides. We're going to just keep building some perspective on uh, on price. Now, I want you to take a look at this. Now, this comes from Zillow, and I'm not going to vouch for the accuracy of this, other than it came from Zillow. And so it takes the median days depending on Zillow. Now, it's not days on market, median days depending. So this is the way Zillow is measuring it. So let's just take a look at where we are right now. So if we've got Memphis in the house, which says you're at 21 days, right now, depending. Let's see, do we have Dallas Metro on here? Dallas says you're at 23. So Memphis, you're number 16. Dallas, you're number 13 in terms of Zillow's reported numbers on days to contract or days to pending, which is not a huge number of days. And yet you can see how it's tracked over, crazy COVID. May 22, we were 5 days in Dallas. Then 23 was 10. May 24 was 15. And of course, we can see the trending up. And obviously, it's going to feel different. Now, of course, that's May while we're in the peak of seasonality still. So we're going to probably see that, coming up as we now work past the peak season. Now, so let's just kind of go with this, it being that's kind of normal. There's nothing weird about 20 something days on the market to the time it goes pending. Now, here's the thing that I want you to keep in mind. The days to pending are on the properties that are going pending. Are there some properties that just aren't going pending? They're expiring, they're canceling, they're coming off the market because they're getting frustrated. So one could make the argument that if we're anywhere past 21, 22 days without an offer, we're already past the norms that we were seeing in May, and we really got to look at our price really, really hard. And the other thing we're going to talk about in a moment is study your market, because for you, if pricing begins with you, how strong have you built your philosophy around your market and around pricing? And if we go back to these slides, now this is right from the National Association of Realtors website, and it's the housing inventory shortage tracker that they have. And of course, you'll see the blue means sufficient supply of homes. Now, this could be a thing that you use to educate the people in your database about what the market is. And you notice that so many markets are different. We have high housing shortage up in the Northeast. We have high housing shortage in Los Angeles, San Diego County, Orange County. And yet you look at Memphis and you have sufficient supply. Dallas, it says you could use a little bit more permits, and yet, you have high absorption and demand, and yet you also have big supply right now. And this was as of March. So the last time NAR updated this was in March, and I know, Dallas, you are adding supply, and demand is ebbing a little bit. So that's probably not quite as accurate any longer. Memphis, this on this housing shortage tracker index, they also part of how they determine it is how many housing starts are there in relation to job growth. And they're saying statistically that Memphis has very slow job growth right now, which is hampering the ability to absorb inventory and leading to that sufficient supply. And again, you can find this if you'll just look up the housing shortage tracker, National Association of Realtors. You'll be able to find this and you can dig into it. And it's got some graphs for your local markets and such as well, so that you can dive in. Let me give you a pro tip. Write this down. Gary has always told us that our job as real estate agents was to be the local real estate economist of choice, meaning we've got to be the person that educates. Whoops, we've got to be the person that educates our consumer on the opportunities of our market, particularly because real estate is local, not national.
Yep.
Oops. Okay, well, I'm getting some feedback, so I don't know. Memphis, you might need to mute. I don't know where that came from, but anyway, just to be safe, or maybe your mic's turned off. Our job is to be the local real estate economist of choice, which means you have to get absolutely certain about your market. You've got to study your market. You've got to understand the dynamics. How does it fit local versus national, so that you can debunk some of the national noise. I think the interesting thing about our market today is we have a consumer that's more confused than they've ever been about what's the market going to do. Is it a good time to buy or sell? Is it a bad time to buy or sell? Is the market going to crash? Should I wait? What's going to happen with interest rates? And I do a whole course on getting buyers and sellers off the fence, where we look at what we call our messaging. How did we become that economist? And it starts with you really paying attention to the noise that's out there, and then how do you counteract that or use it to your benefit? And you find the buzzwords, or you find the statements, you find the articles. So if you're an iPhone user, write this down, get a subscription to Apple News. If you're a Google phone person, God help you with those things. I don't know how that works. And so I'm an Apple guy. I got the Apple thing running. But if whatever Google News or whatever that version of that is, get that. And program your favorites to business, interest rates, mortgage rates, real estate, economy, inflation, so that it'll feed you all the articles like from Barron's and Forbes and others, news articles from various newspapers, and you can find the stories to validate the position that you're building for your market. I'm going to give you an example right here. And again, I'm going to send you these slides. This was on Fox Business, July 5th. And it said major housing markets finally rebounding as buyers gain upper hand in unexpected cities. And it says Denver leads the nation with a 100% inventory jump as nearly half of America's largest metros surpass pre-pandemic home supply levels. Now, that's actually good news to get buyers off the fence. And yet it doesn't mean a market's going to crash. In fact, you can pull the language from some of these articles. Here it says the real estate marketplace said nearly half of America's 50 largest metros had real estate markets whose number of active listings as of May had surpassed pre-pandemic levels. Now, here's the interesting thing. So in the media room in Realtor.com, it says this. Chief economist Danielle Hale at Realtor.com, it said in some areas, affordability concerns have also slowed buyer demand, giving the market room to breathe and contributing to gains in homes for sale. Dallas, Memphis, Austin, San Antonio, where I am. In general, we're seeing strong inventory rebounds in metros that have built more in the last 6 years. This milestone understands both the importance of enabling housing construction and the growing divide in housing conditions across regions. Here's the key word, where some markets are rapidly normalizing and others remain stuck in low supply dynamics. I want you to see these are the kind of things that you look for and you hunt around to build a message around, to build stories around that compel people to get in the market now. So we have a rapidly normalizing market while places like Connecticut and New Jersey are stuck in low supply because they don't have the ability to build the way a Dallas or a Memphis does to be able to put housing stock into the market. They don't have the available land, and plus a lot of restrictions and everything else that they might be dealing with. So you can build a story. So Dallas, look at you. You're 55% above pre-pandemic inventory. Now, pre-pandemic, you were really tight supply anyway. This doesn't mean your market's crashing. It means it's normalizing. We don't have scary amounts of inventory like, when I was in my first year in real estate in a crashing market, we had 19 months of inventory. So try that on for size. That's scary. When you have 4 or 5, it's okay. Now, you got to watch it. It's a trend that's moving in a direction towards a buyer's market, and yet it's not a full-on scary market. It's just one that requires us to be better tacticians and better counselors for our sellers and our buyers. So how do we do this? Let's go to the get ready, get set, go. Shift happens. And if you're going to maximize your effectiveness as a consultant to home sellers, you got to get ready, which means you got to study the market, pre-qualify your sellers, make sure that you're working with people that are committed to selling, and update your listing presentation so that you can set expectations clearly, help people understand the opportunities and the dynamics of the market. And then, of course, we got to go get the right price. So when it comes to study your market, be more knowledgeable than the headlines. Spend times in your MLS stats, the trends in your market, and the local conditions and the trends that affect them. Preview more properties and communities to get a better understanding of what the broader market is. And then take your MLS data and track market numbers and price ranges that you work. What's the list to sales price ratios? What's the days on market by price range? What is the home supply by price range in terms of months of inventory? And be careful of looking at those segments of the market when looking at comparables. What really represents the market? Get the big picture, right? Make a big note of this one. Buyers will prioritize the deal rather than the area. Your sellers are competing with homes in their price range now all over town, or maybe all over McKinney or all over Plano. It's not just one neighborhood that they're competing with anymore. And just drawing conclusions on stats on one neighborhood may not be enough. We have to look at the competing market, not just neighborhoods, and evaluating price. Um, Here's a little tactic for you. Take time to study and internalize the statistics that are reflective of your market, which matter to your sellers. Choose numbers and statistics from the MLS and use the data in a sentence later that same day. In other words, how do I take the data and turn it into a story or turn it into a message that represents an opportunity or better showcases the opportunities of the market or the realities of the market so that I can help people make good decisions? And then practice these conversations or these messages. Make sure you're using formulas and graphs. Depict absorption rate. This is the big one. We talked about month supply, which is calculated by the number of active homes in the market divided by the number that sold in the last 30 days. And that gives you your absorption rate or month supply of inventory. It's going to vary by price range. It's going to vary by micro markets. I know a neighborhood here in San Antonio right now, a buddy of mine lives in. His neighborhood has a 14-month supply of inventory. That's not the broader market, and yet it happens to be his neighborhood. I think it's got a lot of military PCSing. There's a lot going on with that particular area. So here's a little thing that I want to share with you. This is not the topic of today, but before we get into it, I want to address this. In fact, write this down. I want you to write this down before we get into this. Something Gary Keller said at the beginning of the shift, and not many people heard it. And I think it's vital that you take this and absorb what I'm going to say. And then I really want you to think on it. In fact, as a community, I want you to think on it every day, every week, maybe every sales meeting, every time you get together. Think about this message from Gary Keller. He said at the beginning of the shift, here's what he said. He said, it's the agent with the right messages that match the market, combined with the right mofers, that's going to win the market. Again, one more time. He said, it's the agent with the right messages that match the market, combined with the right mofers, MOFIR, that's going to win the market. Now, if you've not heard the term MOFR, write this down. It stands for Make Offer for Immediate Response. Make Offer for Immediate Response. And the way this works, if we think about messages that match the market, in an environment where if I'm in Dallas and I've got a lot of new homes, which I know you do in Dallas, one of my messages in an environment where interest rates are in the middle sixes might be, did you know you can still get a 5.25 or a 4.99% 30-year fixed rate today? And that's my hook line. And then I'm briefly going to explain how that can get done. That would be the message that matches the market. So it's an opportunity. And then the MOFR is the offer to engage with me. And so I'm going to put back up on the screen some samples of different messages that might apply to you. Memphis. Buyers get breathing room, list to sales price ratio. Some data that I was able to find online said that your average list to sales price ratio has been running 95 to 96 the last couple of months, 95 to 96%. Now, I don't know if that's current list price or original list price. If it's original list price, it could be less than that even when you take consideration price reductions. And so it didn't say how it was calculated in that regard, but 96% would say, oh man, there's negotiation room. Or if I want that 4 discount points to buy my rate down 1% from FHA 6.25 to FHA 5.25, rather than go in low, I'm going to negotiate concessions. Buy the seasonal dip. This would be another message that could match your market. What we mean by this is, in my markets, we saw a pronounced seasonal dip last fall into winter. and where median price dropped a good 7% during the seasonal dip before it came back up in the spring. And so buy the dip would be, it's kind of like going on vacation on shoulder season. We can build a message around negotiation, concession opportunities. We can build a message around for first time buyers, less competition, more choices. We can talk about the future of interest rates, and that's a whole nother big topic. And so those would be some examples of messages. But let's talk about MOFR for a second. So the MOFR that we've used very successfully is we build a message, we have a hook, we build a message, put the message out, and then the MOFR, the make offer for immediate response, has been something akin to this. If you have any possible interest in buying or selling a home in the next 12 to 24 months, find out why the right time for you might be right now. Call me to schedule a no obligation strategy session. Now, let's talk about that for a second. Why would we position that for 12 to 24 months? Do y'all think there are people out there right now that are sitting on the fence that think it's going to be much different, or maybe they should wait, and yet they want to do something in real estate? What do you think? Sarah, do we got the fence sitters out there that wanna, but they're just sitting there?
Yes, and they usually out conversation us, and then we can't educate them, and then they're gone on to
Yeah.
somebody else.
Well, and then by the way, they may be gone to the whole market too. They may sit on the fence because nobody had the right conversation with them and overcame their fears, their uncertainties, their doubts, and helped them move in the market. And yet, sir, many times you're right. Ultimately, they do find that right message, or somebody stimulates them and somebody else gets that opportunity. And so that's a whole nother class right there on, navigating the messages and the conversations to help people move into the market. Today we're focused on pricing. But you have these people that are fence sitting that would be in the market today if they knew different. And again, the reason for sellers to be in the market today, they might be saying, should I wait? Well, you don't want to be a buyer in the market that you're waiting for. That's why you want to take advantage of this market right now. And how do we position you to get the most out of this market and get the best opportunity out of this market? So let's go back, and then we're going to get to the presentation piece of this in just a minute, of how we discuss this with buyers. But let's talk about this right price. If our goal is to get the right price, don't miss the window of opportunity. The original price is critical. This is what makes the statement about how your seller is positioned as it comes into the market, where it has its most reach, because for the people that are waiting for maybe that new fit to come in the market. Now, here's what we want to think. If a buyer believes a house is poorly priced, they'll write it off from the start. So we want to build that position in our mind as we counsel sellers. And by the way, even if the price is subsequently reduced several times or home improvements are made, the best chance for selling has been lost when that was new to the market. And then for homes that have a price reduction, the time to sell often increases 2 to 3 times because you're generally started out in a position of chasing the market. And by the way, I'm going to just, there's an old comedian that used to say things, damn, that makes me mad. And can I tell you, Sarah, do you might remember what that comedian's name was? He lived in Texas. I don't know. And I'm just mad. And that makes me, the thing that I think is the stupidest thing in the world, I'm talking with you now. So I think the thing is, and if you're doing this, I'm sorry, I think it's stupid, is Shelly and I, we follow some properties in Colorado, a couple of areas where we're looking for a mountain place. And we see price reductions come through. And you might see a price reduction come through on a $700,000 property, and they've reduced it $4,500. And I'm going, that's not a price reduction. That's a hallucination. They've been smoking too much of that legal stuff there in Colorado. So, and And yet I know why they're doing it because they want it to show back up in the feed of people that have saved it or searched that area. But what do you think it really tells would-be buyers when they see something they've been following on a $700,000 home and they make a four, five, or $6,000 price reduction? What does that tell the marketplace?
They don't
That
want
they're
to
not
sell.
negotiable
Yeah,
on pricing. They're not
yeah,
motivated.
they're not motivated. They're not willing to really negotiate. They're kind of stuck on their price. And yet it could have been just some agent's idea that we'll get back up in the feed, but it's actually, I think, doing a disservice. And we'll talk about price reductions in a little bit, but here's my tease for you. Price reductions start at a minimum 4%. And if 4 to 6% would be a standard price reduction, 10% would be an aggressive price reduction. And we'll talk about how you decide what in a moment. But let's dive back in here. Okay, so I had my rant. You got a Steve rant there. Um, and so as we dive into this, allow your sellers, by the way, to self-discover. When you take them through the comparables, ask their perspective on what they're seeing. And we're going to give you the formula for how to ask that as we go through this. You could say, as we look at these homes here, for your neighborhood or for your area, I'm just curious, how much would you be willing to pay for your house if you were a buyer today looking at this? And be quiet. Oftentimes they're seeing these comparables maybe in the light you're showing them for the first time and reality hits. Or the fact that that price included that they did $15,000 in concessions that they didn't know. So given what I've shown you about the market, what do you think the house will sell for? Let them come into the conversation. And in fact, what we're going to take you through in a minute will do exactly that. So here's your mega agent mindset. Your job is to get the home sold. Number two, you got to be the expert. You got to walk in with a swagger, not cocky, not ego. You're coming with a servant's mentality of, I can help this person make a good decision. I'm the expert. I know how to get them healthy. I'm not going to let them doctor themselves on this. I'm going to help them make a really good decision that gets them to wherever they want to go by where they want to be there. 14-day mindset. Let me explain that. You're going to walk in with, what price does this home have to be at? How does this home need to be positioned to be under contract within 14 days? And in a shifting market, time is not your friend. So you want a 14-day approach. And we're going to talk about how we help them dial in that 14-day approach. You've got the mindset that it's always the price. There's no such thing as inventory. We don't need to sit on homes for a long period of time and let them age. How do we outperform the market even when days on market rise? And remember, there are two best pricing opportunities: when you list the home and the first price reduction. After that, it gets pretty difficult. So last thing before we get into the presentation is, here's some CMA pro tips. For you to get better at this, you got to dial your CMA in for this market. So first point, pull competing listings and comparables from the competing market, not just the neighborhood. So let's talk about what we mean by competing market. So competing market is, you have to ask the question, if somebody were buying a home here, what other 2 or 3 neighborhoods or communities would they also be considering? And that's your competing market. And include builder communities. So not just a neighborhood. We tended before to confine our CMA to 3 or 4 transactions in the neighborhood. And now, as real estate is becoming more commoditized because there's much more, people are looking broader and they feel they have more time to be a shopper before they buy. So make sure your CMA is broadened in terms of its scope. Maybe similar ages, similar schools, all of that. Now, here's a big one. Scroll through the photos of competing listings with the client. I had a contest. I own a couple of market centers in the Austin suburbs. And I had a competition with my productivity coaching group. And they did a listing competition. The top three got to compete for taking the listing on one of the homes I was selling. And I was very careful. I didn't want to even bias myself. I didn't do my own CMA. I let them do the work, come in and present to me. And the agent who won, there were a couple of different reasons why she won. But I will tell you the one thing that she did that really stood out to me in a big way was when we started looking at the competing listings, meaning the active listings that I would be competing against. She pulled up an iPad and she scrolled through the photos of 3 or 4 competing listings. Now, somebody tell me, what was I doing as she scrolled through those photos of the competing listings? What was going through my head as a seller?
Comparing it to your house.
I was making comparisons. And by the way, so she as an agent didn't have to say this has got better, kitchen, or this has got a better yard, or yours is better than this. I self-discovered it. And in fact, on one of them, I'm going, man, that's really a nice kitchen. I like that. That's really well done. They did a really good job with that. Their floors are really nicer, than mine. And I'm mentally now starting to discount my price expectations as I'm looking at some of the competition. In fact, when we were done, my price expectation had come down, and then she actually talked me up a little bit. And yet it really softened me in that I'm going, gosh, I've got competition, and I really want to sell my house, so I got to make a really good choice. So scrolling those photos through the competing listings, especially when we're in a beauty contest out there, so how are we going to win the beauty contest? And then you're going to take and build a high to low range of value based upon the competition and comparables. I'm not going to come in and say it needs to be blank, but we'll go through the CMA and we'll come up with a price of maybe 280 to 320, whatever it is, and say it feels like the range is somewhere around here. And by the way, remember that also in soft markets, heavier emphasis has got to be put on the actives and the pendings versus the solds. Solds get you in the ballpark. The pendings tell you what the cusp of the market is, where the most recent activity is. And then, of course, the actives dial in your competition. And I find, call the pendings, call the agent, say, hey, I know it's not closed yet, and yet I really need a great comp for a property I'm working on. Can you tell me, did they do any concessions? What can you tell me about how it wound up? And many agents will share with you. They shouldn't, but they will. So let's go shift gears, and I want to kind of paint a picture. Now, here's some graphics that you can use in your presentations. If you're updating your presentation and you want to help somebody understand the macro part of a market. Now, think of this as a seller's market where, and you look across the bottom, it's condition versus the comps. On the left axis, it's the price versus the comps. Now, pre-COVID and COVID, just about everything was in the market. It took a lot for something not to be out of the market. And then as markets shift, then you have, some homes that are out of the market, and, then you got some that are in the market. Now, the out of the market, some of them, they ultimately surrender, they go off the market, or they've got to be price reduced dramatically to get in the market. Maybe their condition improved, whatever the case may be. Then maybe what some of y'all are starting to feel right now is you get to this place where there are fewer and fewer homes that are really getting a lot of gas, and they're really making it happen, and maybe they're even getting multiple offers. And there are some that just they're getting showings, and it feels like they're priced okay, but they're always a bridesmaid, never a bride. They're kind of in that no man's land. That was my daughter. My daughter's home was, they were kind of in this no man's land. They were getting showings, they were getting activity at their open houses, and yet people weren't biting. And it had a couple of factors, like it back to some townhomes, and yet, well, that's a factor that you make a concession around price to bring people in. And then, of course, there were some that just weren't selling, that were out of the market. And then, of course, when the market does the severe shift, it looks like this. There are very few things in the market, and most things are out of the market. They would be chasing the market. And I think many of you are you're not here today. You could be here, and you could be here. But many of you are probably feeling that no man's land, and you're just on the edge of being packaged correctly, staged correctly, priced correctly to win the market. And yet we just got to make some really big decisions. So, with that said, let's go to this next piece. And I want to set this up for you. Now, I think this is where you're talking about, Sarah, the video y'all played. And I want to position this for a minute. So, after we've done the things we need to do, we've done this, we've gone through the comparables, the CMA. One of the things that I may want to do, depending on kind of where their thinking is I might say to them, now, what I'd love to do next is educate you a little bit on what smart sellers are doing today to really position themselves for this market to be a successful seller. Can I walk you through what smart sellers are doing today? And can maybe some strategy around pricing? And they will always say yes. And I call this the Intelligent Seller's Guide to Pricing is what I've labeled it. And then, of course, when I did this at Family Reunion, we said educating the seller with a talking pad. Now, I'm going to show you this on some slides because many of you are in a training room rather than writing with my document camera. I'm going to give you the concepts on slides, graphically easy to read. And just know that this is not what you would do with a client. What you would do with a client when I say, I'd love to educate you a little bit on pricing strategy and philosophy and what really smart sellers are doing today. Can we do that? And then I'm going to pull out a legal pad and I'm going to draw some lines on a legal pad. And I'm going to illustrate this and take them on a journey together of self-discovery. So you can draw this out as we go. And again, as I'm going to send you these slides. So it would start out this way. I've asked their permission to go ahead and educate them a little bit on pricing. And then I write at the top of the page, now there's 3 prices for every home. And I draw 3 lines, just like you see here. I said there's premium price. Now, guys, this is what I believe is the absolute most we can wring out of the market. And so the most we can justify, and it's a bit of a reach, but it's justifiable. And then there's market price. That's the one that really gets you out of here in market timing. That's probably the best likely price that we want to be at. And then there's wholesale, and wholesale would be probably a price you don't want. It's those people that guarantee to buy your house, and it's I call it wholesale price. It's not what you want. It's not what you have to settle for today, because the market will still give you plenty of opportunity. So let's talk about where we're going to decide to price your home today. Whoops, excuse me. And then I draw these vertical lines on each. Whoops, sorry, it went crazy here. I draw these vertical lines on each side. And so I'm going to draw the vertical line on the left side first. And I said, now you've been watching the market, and markets tend to trend towards an improving market, where we have an improving market would be defined maybe often at times as seller's market. We have fewer sellers versus a plethora of buyers. And then we have softening markets where we're building a little bit more inventory, and buyers aren't quite as abundant. Maybe they're a little reluctant because of maybe conditions in the market. Now, let me ask you this. You've probably been paying some attention to the market. Which way does it feel like the market's trending right now? Is it softening or is it improving? And most people in our markets right now would say, well, it feels like it's softening. I'm seeing homes stay on the market longer. And you go, you're right. So part of what's going to determine, how we position your home today is what's the trend of the market. And I write the word trend on that line. And then the other thing that's going to determine it, as it relates to the marketplace, is your risk tolerance for not getting your home sold. Am I willing to risk going high, hoping of getting a high price, but maybe risking my timing, getting to where I want to be, getting my move to Nashville completed in my ideal 90 days? Are you willing to risk that? So that's going to be part of what determines where we decide to price your home today. Now let's go to the right side. Now over here, so let's go over here, and I would draw a vertical line on the right. Now the other factors that are going to, determine uh, where we price your home today also is condition and how much time we have to get the job done. And now when we think about condition, tippity top, premium, I mean, if it's like a model home and it's staged absolute, it's a 10 on a 10 scale, that can help us push price up. If it's a home's got neglected, deferred maintenance, and I'm writing that down, it's going to pull us back down. And so what we have to do is kind of do a check on, we went through the competition. Remember, we went through all those photos. And when you think about your home and the competition on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being model home, 1 being it's a crack house that's going to get condemned, where would you put your home today? And they say a 7. And I said, well, yeah, I think it's, absolutely at least that. And that we don't get into a big debate over it beyond that. That's that they picked it. I'd say absolutely. I think it's at least that. And hopefully they're not hallucinating. And by the time you've positioned it, and we look at the comps and everything else, and then we're going to come back and I say, look, so let's go back to everything we looked at today. So when we looked at those competing properties and we looked at what had most recently sold, it feels like it was very clear to me that about the most we can push out of the market, the very tippity top, is about 260. Does that feel about right for you guys? And they should feel that. Now, market price, when we looked at those we're competing with, it literally looked like, to be competitive, that maybe somewhere near 235 was kind of the sweet spot. Now, if we needed to get you out of here tomorrow, an all cash buyer or somebody just willing to pull the trigger immediately, quick close, that might be 200. So, given all that we've looked at today with regard to the fact that I know that you want to be in Nashville in 90 days, typically it's taking 55 days or so right now to go under contract and get closed when we're kind of at market price. So we can certainly hit your timeline, if we make the right decisions today. So let me ask you this. What price feels like Nashville in 90 days to you, given that the trend is softening? We've got, good condition. What feels like the right price for you? And I'll tell you what happens almost every time in a seller's market. Most of them don't go to premium. They'll usually pick right at market or a little above because they don't want to price themselves out of the market. And yet, when we think of buyer's market, I often have people that'll price it below market because they don't want to risk not meeting their timeline. They see the trend. And if the trend is pronounced, or they say, Steve, we don't really have to be there in 90 days. We have plenty of time. I would say something like, well, in different times when the market's hot, time is our friend. And yet, let me ask you this. If we take 6 months to get your home sold, and the trend says pronounced towards a softening market, what could happen? And they go, well, I guess prices could go down. And then I go, yeah, you're right. And then I might draw a dotted line below wholesale. And I'll say, I'll draw this perfect dotted line. I said, do you know what that line is? And they won't know. And I'll say, that's future wholesale. And then I'll draw a line right below market. And I'll say, so that means that's what? And they'll say future market, which means this is what? Future premium. And so maybe they said they wanted to list at 245 or 247. And I said, well, we could do that. And you never say no. You just say we could do that. And yet my concern is that if the market stays on this trend and continues to soften, we could find ourselves behind the market. And so what some sellers do is they get a little ahead of the market and they actually choose to be firm in their pricing if need be. And so, given that, again, that you want to be in Nashville in 90 days, absolute, it's not an option, not willing to risk that. Given that time is not our friend, the trend is softening, where would you like to price the home? And almost every time they're going to pick somewhere around that market price, maybe lower, because they don't want to risk what's important to them. And so motivation is key to all of this. And let's get some thoughts. So I've got a few other thoughts for you on this, but let's park it on this for a minute and answer any questions or maybe some insights or ahas around this little conversation.
I mean, I've got several people texting me that they absolutely love this training. So thank you. I would say I think one thing we miss as sales practitioners is we over talk and overshare.
Mm.
And the discovery piece, and this is such a crucial piece in it to get them to discover that. So I love how you're getting their buy-in, and they're the ones that are being empowered to make the decision based off the information you're providing.
Yeah. And by the way, Sarah, it's never it's not never a battle because remember your job is to go in as fiduciary and help them get what they want. And I'm think about the language we used. Rather than say, if you really want to sell your house, this is what it's going to take. We didn't say that. What did we say?
Smart sellers use an intelligent guide to pricing.
Yeah.
Smart, intelligent.
Yeah. Well, and of course, we set them up to be smart sellers, smart smellers, smart smellers, smart sellers. Yeah, say that real good. And yet, remember, their motivation is the key to this whole conversation. What looks like Nashville in 90 days? Don't talk about getting a home sold. Talk about what they want. Remember, when people are listing a house, they're not listing a house, folks. They're solving a problem. When my daughter was ready to leave Murfreesboro and move to Florida to be closer to her in-laws and close to family for my little grandson, that was being put at risk was when it was getting late in the summer and the house was no longer a house, it was a problem. And they wanted the house gone so they could get moved. And so we have to be the problem solver and be a good guide and keep taking them back to what they want, what they want, what they want. Tie it into the conversation constantly. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, Steve, can you help me with a quick question that I had?
Sure.
Sometimes I find that there is, in some areas, a lack of data when it comes to pricing strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always hesitant to, I guess, be overconfident about a price point when you're talking about that pricing in the middle, that's the price that might move it or a range that might move it, knowing that we might need to reduce. So I don't want to oversell that number too much. How do you get yourself sort of beyond that mindset, or how would you navigate that? Does that make sense, what I'm asking there?
I think that's real, at times, and where, if you don't have, maybe it's rural or it's very unique, urban property that's had a lot of improvements versus others, or maybe not improved versus others, and the comparable data is thin. This is where you have to, again, really have studied your market, be an expert on your market. You could get an appraisal, and yet appraisals tend to be the most optimistic thing and not necessarily they're looking at trailing indicators on solds, not as much the leading indicators of actives. I think it's just the honest conversation. And one of the things we used to say in Bold, is Dinah used to talk about the four P's, or some people put it in the MLS, they put a sign in the yard, and then they pray, somebody else, is going to sell it. And I, on the other hand, also do the fourth and fifth P, which is I prospect daily to find buyers for your home. And number two, I price watch, and meaning I watch the competition. And I think if you have a situation like that, and that's probably the less frequent thing that comes up, and yet it does. And when it does, it's a very transparent conversation. Now you're going to notice that when we go through the sales history and the competition, you have a very unique property and a very unique situation. There's not a lot of data to rely on. And so let me ask you, what were you thinking? And you get their perspective and say, well, here's what I was able to find. And when I read into the tea leaves, I get a much broader range than I might normally. And yet, what we really need to decide is what feels like the right price that's going to get you to blank by blank. Now, keeping in mind, we've got a broad range for you. If we start higher, my job's to price watch this, monitor the feedback, and the consumer will tell us really quickly if we've missed the mark. They either won't come look at it or they'll look at it and they won't make an offer. And yet, because the data is so thin, we've got a really challenging place to start. But here's the broad range. Where would you like to start this journey as our initial offering price? And then we're going to size this up in 2 to 3 weeks based on the feedback we get. And then I would let the market be the bully if I have to go back. The market is telling us no. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Yeah. That's about all you can do. I don't know unless anybody else has got a better strategy. I think that's about it. That's about all you can do. And again, that will be the exception rather than the rule. And yet, great agents, you know how to handle all situations. So thank you for the questions. Okay, let me go back to one last thing to wrap this up. I do want to share with you also that, let me pull the slide back up. Sometimes when I have to have this conversation about them being caught in chasing the market, where they may want to price it higher to start, and I say, well, never, by the way, this top number here, never put a number up here that you're not willing to list it at. So it's the most you can justify, but never put a number up here that is just an airy-fairy number that's artificially high. What's the best you can justify? And maybe it's the one that's really great condition, and maybe they, you got to prepare them for some concessions at that price or whatever the case may be, or they need to do some improvements. And yet, let's say that maybe theirs doesn't quite justify, that kind of pricing, and yet they choose to price it higher. And I'm going to take it at 260 because it's part of the range I identified. Now, if they say, well, can we put it at 260? I will always say, we can absolutely do that. It's at the top end of the range. Now, my job is to make sure we get you to Nashville in 90 days. And so that means if for any reason, the market starts giving us feedback pretty quickly that we've missed it, let's talk about in advance what adjustments we're prepared to make. And yet let's go here as a starting price, and see where it leads us. Now, but I said there is one word of caution I'd like to give you, however. And I say, I tell them, do you remember that Hasbro toy called a Slinky? Do they still make those? I think so. Yeah, the Hasbro toy called a Slinky. When I was a kid, they would show the Slinky going down the steps, and it would just be stepping down one step, down the next step, down the next step. And so I tell them, say, remember that toy called a Slinky? I said, I'll tell them, do they make those anymore? And they go, yeah. I said, well, they used to show these commercials back when I was a kid, the Slinky going down the steps. Now, I want you to imagine you wanted to stop the Slinky. If you're behind it going down the steps and you reach down to grab it while it's going down the steps, where are you going to go? Well, you're going to tumble right down because you're going to lose your footing and you're going to fall forward and you're going to crash. And if you really want to stop the Slinky, the best method is to get in front of the Slinky. And that's the same thing with a softening market. And depending on how severe it's softening, you really want to get well out in front of the market. And this is where you start getting people pricing right at market price or even a little below. Like I said, when I was starting to have this conversation, I was in a market where prices were declining at 1.5% a month. I had to really help people see the severity of the trend and really face up to their competition so that they could make a good decision. Now, if I have this conversation from the beginning, it makes price reductions easier as well. So, the fastest path to a sale this week for everybody on this Zoom is if you've got a listing that is in need of a price reduction, get it right priced this week and let it be under contract by next weekend. And I can tell you, anytime I went into a sales slump, the number one thing I focused on first was price reductions. Looking at all my inventory, and here's the mindset that you need to have when you go down to that kitchen table, because they've already been on the market. I want you to come to the kitchen table with a real opinion. At this point, you got to have a real opinion of what price it needs to be at to be the next one sold in its competing market. And give them that option. Say, I've gone carefully. And by the way, you'll be able to fall back on the fact that there's probably new inventory in the market or other people have adjusted their pricing. And so it's not that you missed it terribly, it's that this is where the market has come to. And because then you can explain the trend conversation like we had. And because the trend's moving this way, I want us to revisit, let's go back and revisit price completely. And let's just make sure we really make a smart decision today so that this final adjustment that we make is the one that gets you to Nashville. And we get you there when you want to be there. And in your mind, be really clear what's the price that's going to get them there. It's going to be the next one under contract in its competing market, not in a neighborhood, in its competing market. So think about that broader market. So last thoughts. Let me go here and then I'll answer any questions you have. So we went through all this. Getting the right price. So don't chase the market. Whether the market is going up or down, you want the price you're listing ahead of the market trend, ahead of it on the way up and ahead of it on the way down. So time is not your friend, like we said on that continuum on the right side. Time is not your friend when the market is going soft. I love what Jackie Ellis, one of our great instructors out there, master faculty, said. You're in a race against time. The best price you'll get is the one you get right now. If you wait, it'll be lower. Price reductions. Here's the question that comes up. Should I take an overpriced listing? I think the answer is maybe. And I'm going to say yes, maybe. I think the mistake we make on overpriced listings is not that they're overpriced listings, that they're undermotivated listings. Be careful of taking undermotivated listings. Somebody doesn't have a real motivation will not take the steps necessary to get the price right. But if they want to go to that 260 at the top of the range, I'm going to take it. And provided they're motivated and they really have to sell a home, and then it's my job to navigate them through ultimately to the right price. But I will have had a couple of conversations about right pricing with them or market pricing or even ahead of market before we settle at that. And so the point is here, there are very few overpriced listings that are too overpriced to take. If you take overpriced listings, 3 elements will help you get the right price: time, your strengthening relationship, and market statistics. So I will tell you that in very soft markets, my standard operating procedure would be that they're getting a market update, a minimum every 10 to 14 days, with here's the latest things that have come on the market, here's what's gone pending, here's what's had a price reduction, here's what's closed. And it's a summary of the market, of their competing market, maybe plus or minus 15%. I might do a little postscript on that. Note that new listings are outpacing pendings 2 to 1, 3 to 1, whatever it is, that you can build the case that what the market trend is doing and they're staying informed. And you're making recommendations with each email or with each conversation that you have. And the strengthening relationship part is you got to be talking to your sellers at least once a week, every week, if not multiple times a week. So pick the days that happens. last couple of thoughts. Manage your listings in a buyer's market. Schedule the price reductions, especially if they've got a predetermined time they want to be somewhere. Possibly get into the next bracket. So instead of going from 260 to 255, go to 250 and get in that next bracket of 50. Keep carrying costs low on listings. Be careful what you promise in terms of marketing and ongoing advertising and promotion and open houses. Let's see, I think and then whoops, let me get the right place. Mind your language, meaning stay on motivation, stay focused on them and what they want. Everything is around them, not you getting a home sold. Never let it feel like commission breath where you're about getting the home sold for you versus getting them what they desire. And then, of course, know when it's time to call it quits. And that's usually when somebody's demonstrating they have no real motivation to make the decisions to do what needs to be done. Um, let's go just right here. Bottom line, there may be no single factor more important than getting the home sold than is the price. Your local expertise, studying the market, your local knowledge, studying the trends is the key to helping that seller get the price right. Let the numbers do the heavy lifting, educate them on the process of making the factors that dictate and drive um, pricing. And we covered that. And that Intelligent Seller's Guide to Pricing absolutely addresses all the factors that determine price. So, where we want to bring the sellers to this understanding, the less we negotiate, the more we make. The buyers know the market, they're studying the market, they're seeing the inventory. Smart sellers sell quickly for better prices. Top agents are bringing negotiation skills to the table. No offer in 3 weeks, you're overpriced, period, end of story. I mean, there's the rare outliers that's a very unusual property that has a very niche buyer. And standard versus aggressive price correction. Again, I'm going to say a standard price reduction is 4 to 6%. An aggressive price reduction might be 10%. And how did you decide which one is appropriate, standard or aggressive? If we're getting showings and yet we're just not getting to the finish line and getting offers, it's probably a standard price reduction. If we're not getting showings or offers, then we got to look really hard. Did we miss it entirely? And we may be completely out of the market. We may have relied too much on sold data, not enough on current competing data, and it really took us out of being competitive. So, wow, that was a lot. I know your brain's swimming. Let me hear some thoughts. I want to know what you took away from this. So let's get some feedback, some insights, ahas. Sarah, start us off.
I know that there's some people in the Memphis room there that has some questions. Linda, do you have the mic that you're running? Can y'all hear me?
You got me now? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, this is Rick Berry. I have a question where I really like the comment, the least amount of negotiating is the better thing. What's your thoughts on a pre-listing home inspection?
Hey, Rick, I think that's really smart. Just in that it highlights for them maybe some things that they can remedy that are going to be less likely to bomb the deal when you get to the inspection. Because how many people horribilize things that shouldn't be horribilized when they get the inspection report, and maybe they've already stretched themselves on their budget. I think, and they just got to be prepared. Remember, they're going to disclose that sucker or everything that comes up, and be prepared to deal with it on the front end. I think that's a smart move, Rick. Not too many downsides with that, unless you have a lot of scary stuff then to disclose, which it was going to come up anyway, and now you can deal with it.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Linda, you got anybody else?
Yeah, we have one more question in
Go
here,
for it.
and then I think we're good.
Hey there, great information. My question is, what are your thoughts on when we're pricing properties or helping the seller to, come to terms with the price, whole numbers versus some of the 999s we see, or the yada yada 900, or
Mhm.
we see some. I mean, I've noticed all kind of craziness on prices, but so I want to know what's your thoughts on, going whole numbers or just under a whole number, or
Yeah,
above, or whatever.
I think if it's priced really well, people are going to find it because it's in the right range for where it's supposed to be. And yet, if the market says 250, 2.5, I'm going to put it at 250. And, I want to be in that 2 to 250 range and the 250 to 300 search range, and be able to hit both. I don't know where somebody's going to set their parameters, but they tend to work in 50s and 25s, until you get in the higher ranges and they work in the hundreds and multiple hundreds. And yet, if it's the right price is 270, I'm going to be 270, and I'm not going to be. Doesn't make sense to go to 250 or 300 in that case, but just it'd be right in there. I think the 999 is an old, outdated concept, so doesn't hurt. No, but it's not. That's not necessary. I'd go to a whole.
Rick said you'll know in 20 days.
There you go. Hey, somebody listen there. I like that. Okay, there you go. Yeah. Other questions or thoughts? Give me ahas. I want to hear some ahas. I want to know what you took away.
If you're on Zoom, feel free to unmute yourself.
I took away just I kind of wrote down your verbiage. I'm going to go watch and make more notes of how to say the things to get them just in a way that they're going to understand it, and getting in front of. Yeah, I thought that was good.
Well, you just hit on something very important. Write this down, guys. Amateurs practice till they get it right. Professionals practice till they can't get it wrong. Now, you might hear this um, a few times, and okay, got it right. Then practice it now till you can't get it wrong. There's the whole 10,000 hour rule around mastery, and yet you can get to excellence in 15 to 20 hours. If you spent 20 hours working on your listing a presentation, working on your pricing conversation, and applying this, that's what professionals do. And hearing something one time and going, okay, that's a great idea. Let me see if I can remember that later to do this. Practice this. Um, you know, practice the conversations with each other. Work together on this dialogue, making it some real play, role play together. So, thank you for that. All right, one more. I gotta have an aha.
I have an aha.
Go, Katrina.
I enjoy your trends and condition conversation that you have at the table, the way you switched out the terms medium, market, and wholesale, and just that whole dialogue. So I'm going to be working on that. So I enjoyed that.
All right, good job, Katrina. Well, Sarah, thank you for allowing me to come pour into the folks there today in Memphis, North Dallas Metro North. Let
Thank
me
you.
know.
Hey.
Let me know who we should.
Dallas Metro North. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, let us know who we should send the PowerPoint to at Dallas Metro North. If you'll just let me know that. My email is stevess@kw.com. Steve S at kw.com. And by the way, if you haven't taken our Never Ending Referrals program, we just launched Monday. If you go to MAPS Fast Track Coaching, go to mapscoaching.com. We just began our 8 lessons. This is probably the last time this year we're going to offer it this year. Just we got a crazy bold schedule this fall. And if you really like to dial in these conversations, mastering how to work with your database, it's $39 a month to be part of our Never Ending Referrals community. And just go to mapscoaching.com, get signed up. You have access to a portal. You can play the recording from last week. We also have a Market Center edition where we can bring it Market Center facilitated right into your Market Center. So leaders check in with me on that. I'd love to offer you that opportunity. Tammy Youngst and I can come right into your market center via the power of video.
Well, and I think having you on here has been really good so they could put a face to the name because our PC coaches have offered that, and I would love to bring that back. So yeah, no, I really, really appreciate it. And I'm glad that you shared those classes. So thank you for your expertise.
You
We
got
are very grateful
Yes,
for it.
and he's even funny in the videos of Never Enough Girls because we did it last summer. So it's entertaining just like this.
there.
Steve, can you just touch on just like 2 seconds?
Sure.
Because we were talking about bold in our ALC meeting. So can you just say the power of like why everybody should go this fall?
Well, first off, yes. And, Bold has been, I've been part of Bold since the beginning in 2009 when we launched it. They call me the OG. I don't know if that stands for original guy or old guy, which one, but anyway, it's one of those. And the new Onward Bold, when Gary decided it was time to update Bold, we suffer from some sins of the past where we said it was rewritten and it was really shoeshine. This is a complete from the ground up. In fact, Gary, when his team sat down to do this, said, what would we be writing today? If Bold had never existed, what would we write? And Gary built the mindset sections around something called the 10 Bold Truths. You've probably heard him talk about it at Family Reunion. I'm sure he'll mention it at Mega Camp. We still have bold laws, but they're different. They've got 38 of them. But we get into the skill set. We still have, powerful conversations for dialing in your database, for sale by owners, all of that. The new listing conversations that are necessary for today. And where Bold has really come of age is really with texting and with social media. We know it's getting harder and harder to build connection out there today with do not call and everything else that we're faced with. And social media is becoming a very powerful tool. And in this new Onward Bold, one of the journeys we take you on is something we call the social media lab. There's social media plays in every single session of Onward Bold. And in fact, we've built it off the models of Ken Pozak. And if y'all are familiar with Ken, Ken's the guy who moved from Detroit, Michigan to Orlando, restarted his real estate business in Orlando from scratch, and in 7 years built a business doing 8 million in commissions through social media and YouTube. And so essentially, we teach you how to run those plays. And here's the truth: most people don't love social media, and yet you're spending time there. And what if the time started to produce 5 to 10 leads a week and 5 closings a month? And that's the social media journey that will begin in Onward Bold that you'll carry forward, along with all the traditional things of really navigating your business, your database with the message of today. And how do we penetrate through this market where we have a consumer that's fearful and confused? So it's still got the accountability. It's the environment you go in where you have a team environment to grow and prosper together. I don't think there's anything better you could do in the third, fourth quarter than to get in a Bold room. So I trust that helps. All right, gang.
Thank you so much.
We'll see
Thank you. You're awesome. Appreciate you.
Bye.